You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is September 29th, 2024, and this is episode 297 of Lighthearted. In a few minutes, we'll hear part 2 of a two-part interview with Henry Gonzalez, president of the U.S. Lighthouse Society. Before we get to that, I have an announcement to make. In a few weeks, I'll be posting episode 300 of this podcast. After doing an episode every week, occasionally more than one a week, since June 2019, we'll start doing a new episode every 2 weeks instead of every single week, again, starting after episode 300. I'm still enjoying doing the podcast as much as I ever have, but going to a bi-weekly schedule has been something I've been thinking about for a while. Doing that will accomplish a few things. It'll make it easier for me to put my best effort into every episode. It'll also open up more time for the other things I do for the USLHS, including managing our digital archives and online research catalog. For the past year, I've been uploading my own archives that I've collected over the past 40 years into the USLHS archives, and this will give me more time to finish that project. Once I go to the bi-weekly schedule, when possible, I'll post short episodes in between with edited versions of older interviews. I've posted a few of those recently under the name of Lighthearted Light. That's Lighthearted, L-I-T-E, Light. So I hope everyone understands the reasons for this decision. Finishing 300 weekly episodes seems like a good time to make the change. Back to today's episode. As we discussed last week, Henry Gonzalez has lighthouses in his blood. He's the great-great-grandson of a lighthouse keeper who served on the north coast of Spain from 1863 to 1904, and he has a third cousin who is currently a lighthouse keeper in Spain. Henry became the president of the U.S. Lighthouse Society this past spring. He was the Society's vice president for East Coast operations from 1999 until 2006, and then the Society's sole vice president until March 2024. He was the project manager for the amazing restoration of Thomas Point Shoal Lighthouse, the last cottage-style screw-pile lighthouse in its original position in the country. Henry and his wife Chris have seen hundreds of lighthouses throughout the United States and Spain, Portugal, France, and Norway. They have 3 children and 6 grandchildren, several of whom are being trained to be future lighthouse keepers. Let's listen to part 2 of my interview with Henry Gonzalez now. Back to the Spain tours. Are there any plans for more lighthouse tours in Spain?
We don't have anything definitive yet. There were certainly a lot of requests as we finished that one last year about, hey, when are we going to do the rest of Spain? And so we are contemplating something along the Mediterranean coast. And probably again, now in this case, we could probably get a larger bus and more members because it's a lot flatter there, and so the roads are a little more traditional, if you will, and so we may be able to get more people on these tours, but nothing definitive in the plans yet. But we're looking probably at 2026 at the earliest.
Mm-hmm. Good to hear. I'll keep an eye out for that. Just one more thing about Spain I'm wondering about. Obviously, it's similar in so many countries these days. The governments generally don't have enough money to take care of the lighthouses anymore, so it's falling onto various organizations, whether it's museums, nonprofits, or whatever. Is there much difference between the way lighthouse preservation is being handled in this country and what's happening in Spain?
Yeah, there are definitely some differences, but in the end, I think they're really sort of similar at this point. So we in the States have had, the good fortune of the National Historic Lighthouse Preservation Act that has helped tremendously over the last almost 25 years now. Next year is its 25th anniversary. And that has allowed a lot of lighthouses, over 200 now, to be transferred from the federal government into not the hands of nonprofits, of other government agencies, and even many into private hands. Well, Spain does not have an NHLPA equivalent. And the work is being done at the regional Port Authority level. But as they have automated, and in particular, as they have unmanned the lighthouses, what has been happening, especially over the last 10 years, is they have reached out to local communities, to local government agencies, and worked out agreements to have some kind of a partnership for opening it up to public tours and that kind of thing. So in about 3 or 4 cases, the lighthouses that we visited were being maintained. The light station was being maintained by the local county or the local municipality, and they would open it up for us if it wasn't open that particular day. And they quite often would have a small gift shop, a little bit of a museum, and things of that nature. So that has been happening. There's at least, I think there were at least 1, maybe 2 lighthouses where the local county has not only worked out an arrangement with the Port Authority to take over the light station, but the local county has also turned it into basically a lodging opportunity. So a couple of them are now managed by the county, but it's not a museum, it's not a gift shop, it's available for lodging purposes. And so I've been starting to see more and more of that, what in Europe is typically called alternative uses of lighthouses. And so I remember about, I think it was in 2010, 2011, I went to Spain at the invitation of the Spanish Lighthouse Authority at a conference, European conference of lighthouse preservation hosted by IALA, the International Association of Lighthouse Associations or something like that. And we talked about, in fact, my presentation was about the NHLPA and alternative uses. And I'm glad to see that several lighthouses are now have now gone through that process. But as I also learned, it is very dependent on the local lighthouse port authority. For example, in the northwest corner of Spain, which is where the tour ended up, they have not done that. And they are very reticent at this point to doing anything with organizations or people outside of the the Port Authority community. But I think they'll come around. I think they'll come around. I think they'll realize that there's a lot of benefit to them, to the public, and so forth in doing that sort of thing. So they've made a lot of progress, and hope to see more of that in the years ahead.
Yeah. Well, with lighthouses everywhere, you mentioned alternative uses, and those can be so important, especially, as you said, places where people can stay overnight, vacation housing, whatever. Those tend to be super popular, and it's a nice way of making a lighthouse more or less self-supporting.
Exactly. As you know, lighthouses are always placed in such ugly locations. Nobody would ever want to stay overnight at some of these places, right? Yeah. Just kidding, of course.
Well, I could name a place or two that really are in ugly locations, but I would say 98% of them are not. They're usually in absolutely gorgeous locations.
There you go.
So I think you've traveled quite a bit. Have you seen lighthouses in many other countries as well?
Yeah, I've traveled a fair amount through France. I've seen quite a few there. A little bit in Italy. I had the wonderful pleasure of leading a lighthouse tour for the Society in 2019, pre-pandemic, to Croatia. Oh, yeah. And that was amazing. A beautiful, beautiful country, beautiful people, the islands, the Adriatic Sea, just wonderful. And most of their lighthouses, probably 80%, are offshore. On tiny little islands, islets. And so a lot of our visits were by boat. And that was a lot of fun. In a couple of cases, we had these large ribs, rigid inflatable boats. And we were going along super speed. They're kind of like cigarette boats in terms of their speed. And we had a lot of fun doing those sorts of things. I also led, Chris and I also led the Lighthouse tour back in 2016 along the coast of Norway. And we went all the way up past the Arctic Circle to see the Northern Lights. And we were able to see them a few nights, fortunately, all the way up to essentially the border with Russia, which was kind of brought me goosebumps because it brought me back to my days of working for the U.S. Navy and the Cold War and all that. So it was very enjoyable in a sense, going through the Barents Sea up there at night because it was in the middle of December. Everything was dark. Yeah, so I've done a fair amount through there, done some of my own traveling through the Caribbean as well. And of course, here in the United States, Chris and I have visited all the coasts. I think altogether we're up around 600 lighthouses that we've seen. We don't keep copious records like some other people do.
Yeah. Well, I think you're ahead of me. I roughly count about 500, maybe a bit more than that. But
we're close.
Yeah, it's not a competition. I think you'd agree. And we know absolutely. Both of us know people that have seen thousands. But again,
Yep. All over the world.
Yep. And back to Croatia, I believe most of their lighthouses you can stay overnight at. Is that correct?
Many of them. Yeah. Many of them are available for lodging, and that is run at a national level.
Right.
The Croatian Lighthouse Authority basically has a contractor that does all of that for them. And they have about maybe a dozen or so lighthouses that are available. Again, most of them are on these little offshore islands.
So let's kind of move back to what's happening presently with the U.S. Lighthouse Society. Of course, you were the vice president for quite a while. You recently became the president of the U.S. LHS. Could you maybe say a bit about your vision for the U.S. Lighthouse Society in the coming years?
You bet, Jeremy. So, I was the vice president for, 25 years. Okay. Wow. And it was a wonderful journey with lots of learning. And that learning includes, from the founding president, Wayne Wheeler, who is now our president emeritus, as well as from Mike Vogel, who was our president over the last 4 years. Looking back at Wayne's perseverance and his ingenuity, I know he's been on your podcast, but how he started the society, how he left aside his Coast Guard career to dedicate his life basically to helping the nation understand the role of lighthouses, educating the public, helping preserve the lighthouses. What he did just continues to amaze me. And as you know, we are in our 40th year now. He founded the society in 1984, and we had that wonderful virtual Zoomathon, telethon, whatever we're going to call it, that we had this past Saturday to celebrate it, and a lot of people attended that. And I want the society to go on for another 40 years and another 40 years after that. And thousands and thousands of people have received so much joy from their involvement with the society, and our entire board of directors wants that legacy that Wayne started to continue for our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, not only for us, but for all of our members. But that also means we need to recognize that 2024 is life now is quite different than it was back in 1984. The environment has changed, technology has changed, people interests have changed, which means that as we look ahead to the future, we need to honor our past, but we also need to adapt to our changing world and make the necessary changes to ensure that we have a healthy future for the society. Mike took over 4 years ago now, and he had some big shoes to fill in. And the first thing he ran into was the pandemic. Not only was it the challenge of taking over from our founding president, but also, shut down and everything else. So there was no business as usual for him for the first couple of years or so. Our tours came to a standstill, right? And that was a major source of income for the society. But over the previous decade or so, fortunately, through some wise investments on the part of our treasurer, retired Admiral Bill Merlin, and his finance committee, which also included Mike, they had worked hard to get us financially stable and built up some rainy day reserves. So not only did we survive financially, but we were also able to help out. I think it was something like 60 local lighthouse organizations with $1,000 grants over those 2 years of the pandemic. And that was Mike's brainchild. So he led us with a very calming and wise hand and with patience. And so, as my term as president begins here, I'm benefiting from both what Wayne and Mike did as leaders, and I see this as a transition opportunity. And so now looking to the future and looking to vision, I'm going to reflect back on our most recent strategic plan because my vision is the society's vision. They are one and the same, and that is, quote unquote, to be a beacon to the American lighthouse community, providing steadfast guidance and resources on heritage, education, preservation, and all things lighthouse. So let me give you my translation, interpretation of that vision in a couple of primary thrusts that I see for my term as president. The first thrust is looking inwards, looking to our members. And the second thrust is looking outwards to the broader national lighthouse community. So as I think about our members and membership, both current and future, we got to realize that the demographics of our membership have been changing. And so their needs have been changing. I think we need to better understand what those needs are as they change, which means we need to have more communications channels with our members. I want us to listen more. And very importantly, I want us to listen to the younger generations to pursue and attract new members from the younger generations. Okay. There's different technology that's going to be needed, different things that are going to appeal to them. I've listened to several of your podcasts with some of those younger folks, like Andy Robinson of our California chapter, Emily and Vince from the Lighthouse Lowdown podcast. And I've been very encouraged and excited, really, about the passion that I sensed from them. So we need to more actively seek that out, pursue it, capitalize on it, and get folks like them more involved. And again, we need to take a closer look at our changing demographics and how we can better serve our folks. The nature of our tours potentially could be changing as we go through a new generation of people that are retiring and things they like to do and so forth. The second thrust, as I mentioned, is looking outwards. I started thinking about during the pandemic, as not only we suffered through it as an organization and as human beings, of course, but many lighthouse organizations, especially the local ones, suffered through it. And, our tour program was shut down for a year and a half, right? And so I thought about, what if another situation like this happens in the future? What if membership goes down for all our organizations? What's going to be left? And what's going to be left are the lighthouses themselves and the local organizations that take care of them. And so I came to the conclusion that we need to, in the long term, become of greater value and service to the local lighthouse groups, because they're the ones that are still going to be there. they're the ones that are going to be doing most of the heavy lifting to preserve those lighthouses and to keep them open to the general public. And so those are the two thrusts: internal, look at our own members and attracting new folks from different generations. And secondly, working more broadly to provide a greater service to the national lighthouse community, Jeremy.
Sure. So specifically, what are some of the initiatives that are being developed at this point?
Okay, well, we've got a couple of things. Let me start with the outward part of the my vision and the thrust, which is the broader national lighthouse community. We've established a group called the Lighthouse Managers Advisory Group, LMAG, and we have been inviting managers and executive directors and so forth of lighthouses from around the country. We started this a couple of years ago now and had 2 meetings, and then we kind of put it on hold for a while because people got busy with other things. But re-energized it earlier this year, and Kathy Fleming, our vice president, is going to be heading up that group. But the idea here is basically to serve as a forum for dialogue. Okay, bring lighthouse managers together from around the country and share knowledge, share information, lessons learned, and networking. Okay, so we can capitalize on that knowledge again with the dwindling resources that we have, both people and money. If we can capitalize on what others are doing and learn from that, we're going to be in better shape. So it's something still very much in its formative stages, but we think it's going to be of great value. And one of the first things that we're working on in that group is the establishment of some national level preservation awards. Many local lighthouses have their own local preservation awards. And then there's also the F. Ross Holland Lifetime Achievement Award that we, the Lighthouse Society, sponsor, if you will, and manage for the lighthouse community. But we wanted to create something that was kind of mid-level and make it more of a national level. And the several lighthouse managers that attended the first couple of meetings were energized with that, and so that's something that we're starting to work on. The other thing that we are now planning for next year is a virtual conference to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the National Historic Lighthouse Preservation Act, which, as you and many of your listeners know, is the act that made it possible for lighthouses to be transferred into the hands of nonprofits like ours, and actually eventually be put up to public auction, like some of the many lighthouses have been turned over to private hands that way, like Dave Waller up at Graves and so forth. And so what we wanted to do is to bring together the owners, the managers, the executive directors of the lighthouses that have been transferred under this act, which now number over 200. And again, do some knowledge sharing virtually. So the costs for this conference are going to be pretty darn low, and mostly share lessons learned. Okay, what challenges have we had, and how did we tackle those challenges, the biggest challenges? And share that knowledge, and for all the experienced lighthouse owners out there to share that. But also, the NHLPA continues, and more lighthouses are being put through this process. And so we'd like some of the newer owners to attend and also be able to learn from what they hear and capitalize on all of that. And we have already been meeting with the federal managers and sponsors of the program, the Coast Guard, National Park Service, GSA, and they're very excited about the conference. It's going to be in the spring. We're in the process of finalizing the dates now. It's going to be probably about 3 days. We have that much information, I think, that could be shared. So that's another initiative that I think is going to help people. We're going to be providing a service to the national lighthouse community, and we're also going to be, become more well-known to a broader audience in this way. So again, it goes back to our vision. And as far as the other thing that we see a challenge with is, I said that we've got changing demographics on our membership, but we also have changing demographics on the professionals out there that preserve lighthouses. And so we have another program now where we're reaching out to colleges and universities that have historic preservation programs and speaking to some of those, students and trying to get them interested in historic lighthouse preservation. And we've actually had a couple of internships, summer internships. Some students have picked up some thesis topics that we've proposed to them. So that's another initiative, is outreach to those that would be our future historic preservation professionals, Jeremy. So yeah, a lot of activity there, trying to go back to our vision statement and be of greater service and value to the community.
Sure. Those are all great initiatives. I can't believe it's almost 25 years since the NHLPA
seems like only yesterday, right?
Yeah. And I think you and I both might have been at a conference in Newport, one of those early NHLPA conferences.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that was over 20 years ago now. And it's really just amazing to think that over 200 lighthouses have been transferred under this program. And almost all of them have been very successful transitions. Yeah. And it's it's working out the way it should have, which is to allow organizations that can focus on the historic preservation to do that, and allow the Coast Guard to continue to operate them as aids navigation and repurpose the funds that they had from the federal government, and let us nonprofits and private owners take care of the structures themselves, taking it back to the community, in other words.
Yep. And of course, the NHLPA was largely inspired by the earlier Maine Lights program in the 90s that our mutual friend, USLHS board member Dan May, had a lot to do with that.
Exactly. And that's a tribute to the work he did with those folks, and to the Coast Guard for being able to take on that kind of program and work with the community and so forth. And again, it's been a great success.
Sure. Let me ask you, it's not an easy question to address, but I'll go ahead and ask it. I don't need to tell anybody there's a lot going on in the world. There are wars and starvation and all kinds of strife of one kind or another. We're more divided in our society, it seems like, than we've been, certainly in our memories. With all that's going on in this country and in this world, and that includes climate change as well. I mean, there's so many things. But with all this going on, is it still important to preserve lighthouses? And if so, why?
Oh, absolutely. I would say for a couple of reasons. The first one is they still serve as aids to navigation, important aids to navigation for the local folks, for boaters, for watermen. They're not as important to the commercial shipping, but to the local folks that go sailing, that are out on their motorboats, the fishermen, the watermen. They still very much rely on seeing those aids to navigation. They have all their electronic gadgets, right? But there's nothing like seeing that aid to navigation, that lighthouse, and knowing, okay, the electronic navigation system is correct. It is where we are, where it says we are, because I see the lighthouse over there. So that means that the electronics are correct. The second reason is, they're a very distinct visual that immediately ties us to our history. When we visit them in person, we can touch them and literally feel the history. It's one thing to learn in school and in history books about George Washington, let's say. It's another thing to visit his home at Mount Vernon, or to visit the old Cape Henry Lighthouse at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, and to know that its construction was authorized in the first 10 pieces of legislation passed by the very first U.S. Congress, and that act was signed by President Washington. And to see it there, standing after about 230 years, touch it and sense that history, to sense the importance of lighthouses to the growth of our nation, to the safe growth of commerce, and to our economy. So, yeah, they're not as important as they were 150 years ago in terms of age navigation, but many of them are still very much used by local folks, and it's the history. Okay, the history that we can sense and touch, and if we don't learn from our history, we're going to be repeating some of the mistakes from the past, and I don't think we want to do that.
Right. Would you say they also have some kind of iconic or symbolic value as well?
Yeah, the symbolism, their noble cause, if you will, of saving lives, right? And it's take us back to a simpler life, and to the idea that not only are we directing ships and keeping them safe, but the idea that if they were to get in trouble, if they were to wreck on shoals and so forth, light keepers, lighthouse, the light saving service would be out there rescuing lives, rescuing cargo for its owners and so forth. So yeah, it takes us back to a simpler life that, in some regards, I think some of us would like to have some of that back again in the world that is so chaotic right now.
So, what would you say are the biggest challenges facing lighthouse preservation today?
Wow, I'd say three things. Number one, money. It's becoming harder and harder in today's preservation world, with so many competing needs, to find money to do the preservation work. The second one is the people. In some locations, there might be enough money, but it's the people aspect. And we ran into that with the Chesapeake chapter and the Lighthouse Society with Hooper Island Lighthouse. I think we would have done okay money-wise, but we just, we needed more people, especially local people on the Eastern Shore, to help with the preservation. And lastly, Mother Nature. Okay, we've got climate change, we've got rising sea levels at many lighthouses, we've got storms, and even though they've survived for 150 to 200 years, things are not getting any better. So in some cases, you might have the money, you might have the people, but along comes a storm like you guys in the Northeast have been hit with recently, and it's almost like you're starting all over again with some of these projects. So it's a matter of getting all three of those and a balance between them. Those are the biggest challenges right now, I think.
Yeah, I will say that, I'm not accusing you of plagiarism or anything like that, but I'll say that I've been asked the same question, and I touched on the same 3 points. I guess, those of us in the trenches on this certainly recognize those.
Yep, I think we've experienced the same things. And again, the people has to really be driven by the local folks. That's something that I've learned in spades with my time as the manager of Thomas Point Shoal and Hooper Island, and also, learning from many others, and even listening to some of the folks that I've not met, listen to them on your podcast. It's really the local folks that drive everything. Those of us in regional or national lighthouse organizations, we can help, and we can very much help them in many different ways. But if you don't have the local people, which leads to the local money to get things started, it's going to be a lot tougher.
Sure, sure. Okay, here's maybe the hardest question of all. What's your favorite lighthouse?
Yeah. See, I knew that one was coming because you always ask it of everybody. So I gave that some thought. And my favorite lighthouse is the next one that I'm going to visit. I still get, goosebumps and get excited, thinking about, I'm going to go see a new lighthouse tomorrow or whatever. And I get in the car, get on the boat, however I'm going to get there. And it's always exciting. And at the moment, that becomes my favorite lighthouse. Other than that, I got to say, because I spent a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on it, Thomas Point Shoal is certainly the favorite one that I've worked on. And the other ones that give me an emotional attachment is visiting some of the ones that my great-great-grandfather was stationed at on the north coast of Spain. And to literally be at the light station and read his handwriting in the logbooks, it's just, a strong connection there. So, but I'll come back to, that next one I'm going to. I'm always looking forward to new ones to go visit. And for example, next month I'm going to be coming up to New England doing a short road trip, so to speak, and that's part of my outreach initiative. Going back to your question about my vision and the thrust that I talked about, I'm going to go do some listening to local groups and to members up in New England, but I'm also going to be visiting some lighthouses, and I've seen all the ones that we're going to go visit, but I haven't been, up close and personal with some of them. So very much looking forward to seeing those, and so those will become my favorites for that day, for that week, for that trip.
Yeah, well, perfect answer. Definitely give you a big gold star for that one.
I was prepared.
Okay, so we're getting into the home stretch here, but let me ask you, what do you think the U.S. Lighthouse Society does really well? And is there anything, what can it do to do even better?
Okay, so let me start with what we do really well. So we'll start with our bread and butter, which is the educational part of our mission. We produce and disseminate, some really high quality information about America's lighthouses. And we do that through our quarterly journal, the Keeper's Log, our website, our research catalog, your podcasts are another very popular and important new forum in which we can continue to educate and share our resources, our knowledge, which again goes back to our vision. Our tours program are top notch. We travel all over the world doing some wonderful tours, and it's not just the lighthouses. It's the meeting lighthouse keepers in many cases, establishing relationships with international lighthouse organizations, and so forth. And we do some really good hands-on lighthouse preservation. Thomas Point Shoal and other sites as well. So those are the things I think we do quite well. The things we don't do quite as well, and we need to work at in the next few years here, is letting more people know about us, both in and out of the lighthouse community. We're not very good at touting our own horn, at marketing ourselves, so to speak. And I think activities like the event we had this past Saturday, the 40th anniversary event, goes a long way towards introducing more people to us. Okay, and so we need to go out there and spend more time with the local groups, with the regional groups, and get them to know us a little bit better. And so they can think about, the resources, the ways we can help them. Okay, and that will also, in time, add to our growing and changing membership I think so. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think marketing is something, one of the chief ways the society can grow, keep growing as we move forward. So I have one final question for you, and I probably don't need to tell you this one's for bonus points. Okay. And I hope you have your number two pencil well sharpened
Oh yeah.
for this last question. Okay. That question is, what have you enjoyed most about your association with the United States Lighthouse Society?
Wow. I really can't put into adequate words the joy that my association with lighthouses in general have brought into my life, and and with my wife Chris. We've been doing this together now for quite a while, and the things that I've experienced, the opportunities that I've had, the people that I've met. And all of this goes back to the initial opportunity that Wayne gave me. They've really touched my soul, and to know that I've also made substantial contributions to historic lighthouse preservation and things that our grandchildren, our great grandchildren will get to enjoy in the future. I think those are the two things: is the people, the experiences, and how much joy it's brought into my life, and also the legacy of knowing that I've worked on things that generations down the road will be able to enjoy just like I have enjoyed, thanks to the people that came before me.
Mm-hmm. You definitely have made that contribution. And by the way, you get a second gold star for that answer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when I was a kid, I forget which grade I was in, but I know that I had one elementary school teacher who would actually take these little sticky gold stars and put them on kids' foreheads if they answered something
absolutely.
really well.
Yep.
So you've got a couple of those on your, figuratively
cool.
on your forehead.
I'll
right
ask
now.
Chris to grab a marker and put something on my forehead there.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, Henry, this is a real pleasure. You and I have certainly had contact going back quite a few years, but it's great getting to know you better since I've gotten more involved with the society in the past 6 years thereabouts, and especially since you've become president. So great talking with you for this double podcast episode here. And thank you for all you've done. You've touched on a lot of it, but you did so much for the Chesapeake chapter for Thomas Point Shoal Light, and obviously so much as 25 years as vice president, and now well into your first year as president of the U.S. Lighthouse Society. And I think you're still in mid lighthouse career at this point, so you've got a lot left to accomplish and to reach the general world out there of lighthouse lovers and beyond. Like you said, we've got to kind of move beyond the little, I don't know if it's little bubble that we're in or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to just speak to the choir. We know people listening to this podcast and people who are members already of the society, they're already indoctrinated in the importance of lighthouses, but we need to reach a larger public as well.
There you go. Well, good. Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate those kind words. And like I said, it's been a journey full of joy, and I thank you for everything that you're doing with this podcast, and how it reaches so many people that are learning more and more about lighthouses, including myself. I think I mentioned to you, I think you're up to how many is it now? Just 300?
Just about 3. Well, if you count the ones that didn't have numbers, it's over 300 at this point.
And I've listened to probably about 15% of them at this point. And but I continue to learn every time I hear one of them. And it's a great outreach program that you're doing there. So thanks for that. And it's been a pleasure being here with you.
Likewise. And I just want to add that, like so many subjects, the more you know about lighthouses, the more you realize you don't know. That's how I feel about it.
Yep,
and I learned so much every week during this podcast.
Exactly.
So, Henry, it's been a real pleasure, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, Jeremy. Take care.
Henry and I first met more than 20 years ago, and we've had many mutual friends, and it was a pleasure getting to know him better through this interview. As always, I recommend that everyone check out uslhs.org to learn more about what the U.S. Lighthouse Society is and does. You can also read more about the Society's staff and volunteers there. If you're not already a member, please consider becoming one. Memberships and donations help support this podcast, as well as all the preservation and education projects of the Society. Before we sign off, I want to mention a couple of events that are coming up. Next Sunday, October 6th, from 1 to 6 p.m., the National Lighthouse Museum on Staten Island, New York, is holding an International Lighthouse Point Fest. It includes children's activities, entertainment, ethnic food, and entry into the National Lighthouse Museum. It also includes a soup contest. See lighthousemuseum.org to learn more. The Door County Lighthouse Festival in Wisconsin will be taking place this week from October 4th to 6th. It includes air, land-based, boat, and adventure tours that provide access to all 11 lighthouses of Door County, plus others to the south. Check out dcmm.org to learn more. At Absecon Lighthouse in Atlantic City, New Jersey, on October 26th, there will be haunted lighthouse tours. They include a ghost investigation with the New Jersey Researchers of Paranormal Evidence. Check out Absecon Lighthouse, that's ABSECON, lighthouse.org, for more on that. Next weekend, October 5th and 6th, at the Point Cabrillo Lighthouse in Northern California, there will be special tours that will feature a close look at the historic third-order Fresnel lens made by Chance Brothers in England. See Point Cabrillo, that's Point Cabrillo, pointcabrillo.org to learn more. Finally, I'll mention that I have a bunch of presentations coming up in New England from now through November. Visit my website at newenglandlighthouses.net and select Lectures by Jeremy D'Entremont to see the schedule. Several of the ones in October are about New England lighthouse ghost stories. In next week's episode, we'll hear a conversation about the lightship overfalls in Delaware. Until then, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and keep a good light.
I'm gonna let it shine everywhere I go. I'm gonna let it shine everywhere I go. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.